Everybody good?
Chair.
So I will call back to order the regular council meeting. And we have a rise with report from in camera. At the in camera meeting held earlier today, council rose with a report on the following. That council directs staff to draft a real estate principles policy. That was from today's in camera. Next up, I'll look, are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, moved as presented. Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting 1584 from Tuesday, May 30th, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Nightingale. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising? Seeing none, we do have some business arising from committee of the whole. So resolutions that rose from the committee of the whole meeting number 246 earlier today that are here for ratification. The first is regarding the hillside planning study. The motion was that staff be directed to initiate a comprehensive neighborhood planning process generally as described in the committee of the whole report dated June 20th, 2023, and that staff report back to committee of the whole as needed for any additional direction regarding the project schedule and funding.
We need someone to move and second that.
Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then the second one is regarding the daycare project nature playscape structure relocation. The motion is that staff explore options for an alternative location for the nature playscape structure, and that options be referred to the Pemberton Valley Utility Services Committee for consideration. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Nightingale. Any opposed? Motion carries. So that takes us to number 10, which is a delegation from our friends from the Rotary Club. And it's hard to see in attendance, but I'm pretty sure we have Mr. Linklater and Karen Tomlinson, who is the president-elect, I believe. So please join us at the table. I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. I'm resting up for the tournament on Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, staying in shape.
Good answer. Good answer.
Thanks for joining us. You know, you guys have come up in conversation a few times, and we were talking about the good work that you do, and we thought it would be really nice to have a check-in. And so thanks for taking the invitation, and the table's yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Nice to see some of you again, and some new or for the first time or for a long time. Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity. Basically, I have a laundry list of things we've done. Some of you are going to be familiar, and some maybe Sheena's be familiar. The scope of our work spans from 2005. I'm the current president of the club, soon to be past president, and Karen Tomlinson is the incoming president. So again, thanks for having us. Kind of before I go through the laundry list, as I call it, I think you'll, one thing that will come out is just something that I'm really proud of the club is just the partnerships that we have made within the community. And I'll list them as we go through the projects here. And I think that's something we can really hang our hat on. You know, kind of the sum of our parts is greater than any one individual, and kind of the cooperation with different groups just enhances community immensely, sort of thing. So, so where shall I start? I guess one of my past president projects that didn't happen or finish kind of before my term ended, but I'm kind of committed to doing that is part and parcel. Rotary doesn't do stuff for accolades or awards or recognition, but it's also been deemed that could be a fault unto itself. A lot of people don't know what Rotary is, or they see a feature or an amenity in the community and they don't know who it is, or they might hear something about Rotary, but they don't know what it is. So what we're I mean, a lot of us will inform that here is doing an inventory of the stuff we've done in the community and making sure that we have a Rotary logo or wheel or some designation of that to kind of promote the club and make people aware of what we do, because a lot of time when we're in the community, we're doing an event and we're doing this. Please help us fundraise for whatever it might be. And I think if people saw the breadth and scope of what we've done locally, we do a lot internationally as well. I think that would, that could help bump our efforts or make it easier. So without further ado, in no particular order, I guess before I get into that, I did want to kind of thank mayor and council and staff, kind of current and past. We've done an awful lot of work. Certainly Councillor Craddock is a friend of Rotary. You heard us talking before. We're doing our golf tournament this week, and he's going to come burn some meat for us. So appreciate that. And he's a regular participant in our Adopt a Highway program as well. And there's probably a few other things, barn dance and such. And then certainly, Mike, thanking you with your town square hat on for your continued support of the barn dance, feeding the bands so they can make it all night. So let's get to it. What have we done? We were a primary driver and donor of the community kitchen at the community center. And we've done awful lot of work there. And again, I don't know if council's familiar, but we're back at the community center meeting twice a month now. And we secured a grant from PEVIS to waive our rental fees. We had an unwritten agreement in the past where we did stuff or attended stuff or supported stuff, and that was kind of the payoff. So thanks for that. Within that facility, we've been an ardent supporter of the library. We were a significant donor of the Playscape, the Naturescape. So we're certainly interested as to kind of what goings on are going to happen there. And, we have other comments on that one. Because again, now our blood, sweat, tears, and money is not there. And I just want to make sure there's some acknowledged recognition of that, whatever the new one looks like moving forward. We've chaperoned and done security for many youth dances there. We actually worked with the soccer club on a couple of parts there, the landscaping of the community center, and also we put in, well, it's not the new floor anymore. I think it's the former floor of the rec there. And we were an original partner in the Pemberton Festival Hands project that you see when you walk in, sort of thing. And then we're also supporters and advocates of the Pemberton Senior Society and the Men's Shed group. Stuff you could see or you may not see, depending if it's above ground or underground, is that we were a partner in the Meadows Fields irrigation project back in the day when that was the former primary home of Pemberton Youth Soccer. And we know that we have that beautiful facility out at Dendalf Park. You may or may not know, the club has $40,000 committed to the amenity building. So we're really interested in what's going to happen there, and we'd love to have some opportunity for feedback or at least maybe insider knowledge before it goes too much further. But we're committed to that. Coming back closer to town, we were instrumental with many groups, Stewardship Pemberton, the Chamber of Commerce, Rick Hansen Foundation, and I think various levels of government on the 1 Mile Loop Trail. Primarily our section is, I think we call it the Mayor's Bridge by the community garden, all the way to the dog beach, which we also put blood, sweat, tears, and money in. And I put a star here because I ran into Tim Harris. Remember Tim? Because when we did that, we kind of tongue in cheek said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a fire hydrant there for the dog beach? And then he left and I left and we forgot about it, but he had secured a dormant fire hydrant and it's apparently behind the back of the works yard. So we'll work with you guys on that one. That's not a priority, but we thought kind of tongue in cheek that would be quite fitting for the dog park. Again, staying within 1 mile, we have agreed to an $8,000 donation to finance the wood materials for the refurbishment of the team dock and the floating dock beyond that. We had done some work a number of years ago on that one, but apparently, the state of it needs a fair amount of remediation. So we're committed to kind of our commitment to that sort of thing. So I think we're going to get billed by Continental Pole directly, but that's on us and we're going to take care of that. So I don't know if you knew that or not. So we're a supporter of Stewardship Pemberton and their summer camp. We have a bursary program for that. We know Stewardship Pemberton is in a bit of flux right now, but we're certainly committed to that. And then there's that dotted gray pencil line between Stewardship Pemberton and Signal Hill Pack around the community garden thing. So we're committed to that. We're just waiting for some answers back from those groups as to, you know, how much, what's going to happen with the money. You know, I think we all struggle at times with supporting programming that involves a coordinator. So it's a salary or a wage versus a physical, tangible thing, but we are committed in support of that. A little bit farther back, you may or may not know this, Rotary was instrumental in the Inukshuk at the Visitor Center corner there. And before my time on Rotary, they were a primary among many others within the community, blood, sweat, tears, money, product in kind for the Nada Park at the health center. You may or may not know that. We try to foster a relationship with Lil Watts. We've done a fair amount of work in Skatine with the library that then became the sewing area, laundry, a driver's ed program. And we support kind of a Christmas hamper every Christmas as well. We were a core partner and supporter of the former Winds of Change wellness gathering. I don't know where that's at. I can't remember what the Ucklamush name for that is now.
New Quintal.
Yeah. So, and I don't know where that is. I'd love to. I was a member of that committee when I was on council, and it was great. So I hope something will carry on with that one. What you wouldn't see is we were also a contributor to the underground irrigation at the childcare center that is being expanded back in David Mitchell's era. What else? It's quite fitting that Anne Crowley is here because she's a former member of the Rotary Club. And I just wanted to remind you, or just that she was the instigator of the Timber Framers Guild coming to Pemberton for the community barn. And, you know, Rotary has its hands all over that, but it was Anne. So I wanted to recognize Anne for a great thing for the community. What else? We've been a stakeholder in the official community plan and the downtown revitalization. I also want to thank the village and with an extended line to the SLRD for your continued support of our flower basket program. That helps finance our Rotary bursary program. So we were very fortunate. It was very successful this year. So we awarded 3 $1,000 bursaries to PSS graduates. And I think historically we're upwards of $20,000 given back to the community or the youth in the community and the families. How do we raise our money to do this? We're a doer club. There's a lot of Rotary clubs that write checks. We write checks, but we do a lot of work to get that money. And the two primary fundraisers for us are the Rotary and Chamber Golf Tournament that is coming this week, and then the Pemberton Barn Dance, which we saw the triumphant return last year after that thing called COVID. So the Chamber of Commerce is our partner in the golf, and the Pemberton Lions Club is our partner in the barn dance. What else? Youth has really become a bigger priority and a focus for us. And I did want to recognize Karen as our Interact liaison. Interact is youth Rotary at the high school. And then you may all know Mark and Kathy Leverton. Mark helps Karen. He's the yin to your yang, or the yang to your yin in Interact. And Kathy is single-handedly with another member of our club, Phil Reed's wife, Catherine, a teacher at Signal Hill, started an Early Act Club, which is primary school humanitarians. And they're certainly getting a lot of traction. And I think it gives us hope for the next generation because we've got various degrees of age here. And, you know, I think any generation is cynical or suspicious of the newer or the younger one. And so I think that bodes really well for the future of humanitarianism here in Pemberton. Some legacy within the town here. I think I was late this year, but we annually ask for the Village of Pemberton to declare World Polio Day. So thank you for that. And we were we're also the primary instigator of Pemberton becoming a Rotary Peace community, complete with the street banners that were adorned our streets for a number of years. And then I think we got them back and we raffled them off as a fundraiser to raise funds for the good work we do. So that's a somewhat exhaustive list, and I probably don't even have everything, but that's what I got from my Signal Hill Playground. Right, which also disappeared. Yeah, so one of the things we haven't formulated a policy yet, but kind of moving forward, we want to have some type of, I don't want to, accountability is such a negative connotation sometimes, but kind of accountability around communication, recognition, and if there's challenges or hiccups or hurdles, that we're at least involved in the discussion as opposed to seeing, driving by someday and it's not there anymore and there's no communication sort of thing. What else? Internationally, we've gone to the Kingdom of Lesotho, which is surrounded by South Africa many times. Started with our Quilts for Africa project, and we've helped refurbish and enhance a orphanage there and childhood education. Our most recent or current international project is in Mexico, the El Cardinal project, which is, if you guys are familiar with Canuck Place, where, you know, families and siblings can go and their, you know, mortally diagnosed children are getting treatment. It's a similar type of initiative down there because a lot of families, they have to travel quite a distance to get the help or the treatment they need. And sometimes that means, you know, the family is broken apart for extended periods, or they can't go because they can't afford it, or there's nowhere to stay, sort of thing. So that's our current international project, more worldwide and reaching. Again, some of the demographic here may remember polio. Rotary International has partnered with the Gates Foundation for over 20, well, almost 30 years now to almost eradicate polio. And kind of our catchphrase right now is we're this close, and this is almost the hardest part. So we're committed to that, to see that through. You know, there's less than 100 cases in the world a year, and they're kind of within that Afghanistan, Pakistan area. But we're
Less than that.
Yeah, might be less than that.
3 this year.
3 this year. Okay, so that's good. That's the wild variant. Yeah. So we're committed to that, because even within the organization, they're like, well, what's the next thing? Is it malaria? Is it water? Whatever it is. And those are all things, you know, kind of when I look at our areas of focus, it's peace, disease prevention, clean water, mothers and children, education, local economics, and of course, the environment. And then, like a lot of us, and I know back in my time in council, I thought we were quite trend-setting at the time, you know, in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. You know, that this council and the town was committed to that. You know, Winds of Change kind of was an early version of that. So we're certainly committed to that, along with diversity, integrity, yeah. So that's that. What else? Well, I also jotted a note. I thought about this. You know, you guys, when you work mirrors or you wake up in the middle of the night, not in a bad thing, in a cold sweat, but Shirley Henry came into my mind last night, and I wanted to come back a little bit. And again, you know, if it's out there and I don't know it, I apologize, but I know Henry Park is going to be dedicated in the Tayada development. And I know there is a little bit of a green space park there. Is that the one?
That's the one.
That is the one.
Hasn't been done yet.
So I guess I just want to let you know that some of us are still thinking about Shirley and miss her dearly. As a long-term mayor and awesome citizen of this community. So, and then I think, Mike, I might have sent you and Ted a note years ago about, what about Shirley Henry Memorial Airport? Could that be a thing? Because we know, for those of us who do know, she was a driving force behind that. And then maybe didn't get to where we thought it was going to when we were all on council last time together, because of that big rock behind it. But that's something like I just thought I'd put out there. That's a lot. I'll certainly send this to you in the form of correspondence with no necessary action required, sort of thing. But that's that's kind of it for us. I don't care if you have anything to add. I have one thing looking at you that I just thought of again,
Oh,
but
no, like, I'm pretty new to Rotary. I've only been in like a year and a half now, so a lot of this is all so unfamiliar to me as well as past projects. So I'm still feel like I'm getting up to speed on some of these things that are there. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, Rotary has this like policy that you're supposed to have a new president every single year. So it's very interesting that turnover. We'll probably do it more like 2 years here, but yeah, just having that progression and moving forward and keeping that information going is challenging when like that, for sure.
yeah. And I think, as I said, kind of in the intro, we're kind of been tagged as the little club that gets stuff done compared to bigger, more classic Rotary clubs. Our current membership is 9, so we're not large. But one of the things we hope with kind of this tagging of community assets as part of my past presidency is that potentially that could help grow the club. We know everyone's time is valuable, and whether it's, where someone is in their life with children or growing up or empty nesters or retirement, that people don't have a lot of time, but I'd like to, I think this proves that the time and effort and sweat that we do has been meaningful and impactful to this community. What I thought when I just turned to you again, Pemberton has, I'll call it a chapter, I don't know if that's the right word, within the Community Foundation of Whistler. And it's been underserved, and there's money sitting there that doesn't get awarded very often. And I don't know if the Village of Pemberton is at that table. I know Garth was at that table. But I wanted to make you aware of it because I know this is something that Karen has spoken very passionately about, where she grew up, that they had a community foundation, and it's another vehicle or opportunity for others to give and impact the community. So I'm hoping, as I step down as president, that I'll have a little more time and energy, and that's something I want to commit to.
Yeah. I grew up in Revelstoke, and my dad was involved with the start of that community foundation there, but the mayor was actively involved with that as well. My understanding is that there was like connection between the city of Revelstoke and the community foundation. So I don't exactly know how it works, but I just know I never heard about the community foundation when I moved to this town until Garth one day said, "Oh, there's a little bit of money. Do you want to apply for it for something for the canoe club?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Babe, there's this little bit of money." And I'm like, "Well, okay, that's not very much." But I get stuff annually from the community foundation of Revelstoke. Mm-hmm. And I see stuff on there, on Facebook and on social media. It's just more prevalent that people are aware of it in the community and that they give money to it. And it's just a really good way, for a lot of, I don't even know the scope of what they do, but one of the things that I know that is challenging is that when you start a memorial bursary, for example, family gives a bursary out at a graduation ceremony, they can't sustain it themselves. They don't have the capacity, and then usually it has to disappear. So all of those are put under the umbrella of the community foundation, and they manage them and are able to make sure they're funded every year and things like that.
Yeah, your worship, I believe that the village was never asked to participate in that. It fell under the Whistler Community Foundation because they had all of the administration and resources in place. And so when you make application for that funding, you make it through that program for the Pemberton pot of money. Because at the time, there was no resources in the community. The village was not asked to participate or support it. It was felt that it would be better suited with the Whistler Community Foundation as a subset. So that's why it sits up there. And you're right, it's not a lot of people know about it. But that's a marketing thing on that side.
Yeah.
And I believe that there are Pemberton people who sit at that table to make the decision about the Pemberton allocation.
Yeah.
And it's only 3,000 or 5,000.
Well, I think what they call a flow through, they can only award what they earnings they get from the investment or the.
It was a
interest.
fair donation.
Yes.
If I recall, in honor of Gladys.
Yeah, makes sense for sure.
So that's why it's not something that we have been.
I guess it just seems like the people involved with it aren't invested in growing it in that way, like if you wanted to grow that fund, then you would make the community aware of it more and promote it and ask for donations and have people put it in their wills and all those, like, that's a lot of work though, like I totally get that.
Yeah, so I know I exhausted our 12 minutes or whatever it was. I don't know if you guys had any comments or questions for us.
Yeah, I think he forgot the sod at the skate park.
The skate park?
The sod at the skate park.
I'm gonna put the sod into the skate park.
And the all fields.
Yes.
And the community fields.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember most of them.
I remember. Very well.
Well, what a crazy, incredible list. I mean, like just hearing it all like that is, yeah, it's kind of mind blowing. And like you say, there's 9 of you on there currently. I know there's a lot of people in the past contributing to that, but it's mind blowing. So thanks for bringing that to us. I would totally reinforce your statement early on about doing a little more to celebrate your own work and your own successes to get the word out there, because I think you're right. I think a lot of people have no idea about all the things that you have your mark on and that you've worked on here in the community as a club. So I think it deserves to be celebrated in any way we can help that. Let us know. But yeah, amazing work, you guys. Really, thank you so much for coming today. Let's talk again soon, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Okay, are you resting or getting well?
I'm getting better. I sound worse than I am at this point, so I'll be there.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
I don't know what the break salutation is. Have a great rest of your council meeting. Hopefully you're not here till 9:30.
You're welcome to stay.
Yeah.
I am tutoring.
Thanks again, you guys. Much appreciated.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
care.
So at 10:20? Yes. Okay, awesome. Okay, nice to see you. Grizzly says hi, Mike.
Hi, James. Nice to see you.
Awesome.
It's amazing.
Can the whole meeting feel that good? Can we just adjourn right now and just? We're on 11.1, Office of the CAO. CAO Tracy, verbal report.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Richmond. Some more good news. A little bit of sad news in there. Good news from UBCM. We had a response on the resolution as requested regarding taxing farmland in municipalities. So this will move forward. They did make a couple of small alterations that I thought I would share with you, and that was an amendment to the title, which was originally municipal farmland tax exemption. It is now the recommendation to change that to taxing farmland in municipalities. As well, there was a statement in the resolution that actually referred to the tax exemptions and the value methodology. And so the one other change that they made is therefore be it resolved that UBCM requests the province extend the tax exemptions and assessed value methodology provided to rural area farms to farms located within municipal boundaries. So but I thought you would appreciate hearing that that had been accepted and we'll move forward. Another good news, so we have fire received a Whistler Blackcomb Foundation grant for $48,987.11 for an engine 11 retrofit.
Nice.
So incredible, and thanks to the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation. And then congrats to Fire as well. The Fire Smart Community Grant funding has been received for 2023, and that is in the amount of $200,000. And in response to Jane's comments regarding the Rotary contribution to the dock, they have provided the amount of $8,500 towards the lumber.
That's awesome.
Now on to the sad news. I just want to recognize that This is the last official meeting with Sheena Fraser as our corporate officer. Sheena is retiring on June 30th, as many of you know, and will be returning in a part-time advisory capacity starting in the fall after having the summer off. But I just want to thank her for all of her contributions and support over the last year, but over 23, 24, 22 years of contributions to this organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
That is all I have.
Thank you very much. Before I actually, let's get a motion to receive first of all. Motion to receive. Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I guess this is the moment to also celebrate Sheena, and my biggest disappointment in not being able to be at the meeting today is to not be able to be looking right at you now, Sheena. I'm pretty sure I promised you when you informed me of your resignation and that I promised you that I would make you cry, and I don't think I could do that on Zoom. So I'm hoping I get one more crack at it, but we need to. We don't have time to pause enough to really acknowledge everything you've done and contributed and invested and given to the village. It hasn't been just a job for you. It's easy to see in the way you work, the amount of self that you've given to this organization and to this community. I can't even spell it out. It's really quite amazing. Yeah, it's way above and way beyond anything we could ever ask of anybody, and your fingerprints are going to be all over this town in different ways for forever. We're going to see it. So thank you thank you on behalf of this organization and the whole town. I think and this is where I want you to see the dark in my eyes. I don't say it because I have to. I say it because I mean it. So thank you so much, Sheena.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And I'd just like to say, I got to work with you since 2008. And coming here, the experience and the knowledge you brought to the table for all of us was exceptional. And it was, we had some good times over that period of time. We made a lot of improvements to the community. And a lot of those initiatives were set by you. We brought a lot of really good stuff to bylaws over the years. And it's been a real pleasure working with you. And I really appreciate the experience and knowledge you helped all of us with. And I wish you the best in retirement. And forget that to-do list on the fridge. You can just do it at your own time.
Yeah.
So enjoy. And thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Jenny.
See,
But really, I've been in and out of this role, but you being the constant has really meant a lot to me, and thank you. You just wrap all of us in your arms and carry us through things sometimes, and you take such good care of us, and we're really gonna miss that, so thank you.
welcome.
Come on, Mike, keep going. We haven't made her cry yet.
I'm telling you, I'm gonna get one more crack at it. And I'm also pretty grateful that you're sticking around in some capacity, Sheena. That's a bonus for us.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we'll move on to other business then. Sorry, I gotta get back to my other screen. We are on to 11.2. That's Corporate and Legislative Services Community Enhancement Fund regarding the Pemberton Barn Dance. Mr. Frieden will be presenting on that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's kind of hard to follow that one. I'll do my best for a very short report. Not so great news. Our Community Enhancement Fund has been used very heavily, which in a way is good, but we are now at $1,500 left in the Community Enhancement Fund. We received a request for the Pemberton Barn Dance to provide funds with no specific amount, respecting the fact of the $1,500 remaining in the Community Enhancement Fund, and we're only in June. It is staff's recommendation to provide a personal sponsorship of $400. we would be open to whatever spending remaining left in the community enhancement fund the council wishes to move forward with, but yeah, if there's any questions, I'm available to answer any of them.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, any suggestions? Councillor Helmer?
Yeah, I'm happy to support the recommendation, option 1 for $400. And
Okay.
thanks for coming up with an amount. It's a difficult place to be.
Your seconder? Councillor Craddock, any discussion? Any opposed? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
I just want to say, as we heard from Rotary, the amount of stuff they do in the community, and the nice thing is $400 is going to turn into thousands, and that money all comes back to the community. And that's just incredible. If we could leverage that kind of money all the time, it would be a wonderful thing for the community. So I really well with it. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, very true. Okay, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on to 11.2B, which is the appointment of the corporate officer, Ms. Fraser.
So, as we just discussed, I am leaving the position of corporate officer, which is tied to the position of manager of corporate legislative services. As of June 30th, we do need to have an appointment made. It is, we have just recently appointed Mr. Ferdine as our deputy corporate officer. But it is good to have two elements to this. And I think it is appropriate that the corporate officer position in the interim sits with the CAO, which it has traditionally been over time at various stages when we've gone through transitions. So what our recommendation is that the my appointment as corporate officer for the village be rescinded effective June 30th. And that Elizabeth Tracy be appointed as corporate officer for the village of Pemberton with the duties and responsibilities assigned under section 148 of the community charter and the village of Pemberton officers bylaw. I don't know, my glasses are 683, 2011, effective June 30th.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Any questions? Somebody like to move the recommendation? Councillor Nightingale, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Fraser.
Thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome. Thank
We are on to 11.3 development services regarding an ALC non-adhering residential use application. Turn it over to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Mia, in case I haven't met someone yet. I'm a planning assistant this summer. And so today I'll be presenting the application for a non-adherent residential use submitted at 7367 Pemberton Farm Road East. This application was received on behalf of Joanne Dunda, who is the property owner. And the application is for the construction of a barn with a residential unit on top, so it's kind of like a carriage house. And the land parcel is located also in the agricultural land reserve, also known as the ALR. The barn does comply with our Village of Pemberton zoning bylaw, 832 from 2018. But since the property is in the ALR, it needs to comply with ALR regulations as well. The zoning for the property allows for a farm residence of up to 350 square meters, whereas Joanne Dunda is proposing a residence of 183 square meters. So it fits within that bylaw. However, ALR regulations allow for 2 dwellings on a property with their own floor restrictions. And they do not clarify which dwelling must be built first, whether it's the primary or the secondary. The secondary dwelling restrictions are 90 square meters under ALR regulations. So they surpass that with their 183 square meters. We suggested them to go to the ALC or the Agricultural Land Commission to apply for the non-adhering residential land use. As I mentioned before, it does fall within our zoning bylaws, so it's all okay from our end. And in one additional note is that under our current OCP in section 5.8, We do support development and enhancement of agriculture. There were also no concerns from the internal departments about the application and no further considerations. That concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Thank you for your report. Well done. Any questions? No, I don't think I see any hands. Any comments?
Yeah, just,
Councillor Nightingale, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see you.
Councillor Craddock was first. He had a question.
if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask the question, is there a time frame that the original building has to be built?
I don't think so. That was not stated within the report, but that would be under the ALC to allow or decline that, because that is under their bylaws, yeah.
It'd be interesting to know, because we've seen before where people have put a secondary suite in, they call it,
Yeah,
and never build the original. So it's just
Okay, yeah.
to know if there's a time frame that has to be done. So
they just stated that they're building it while, so that they have somewhere to live while they build the primary, but it didn't state an actual time limit of what their plan is for that.
Councillor Nightingale, go ahead.
I just had a question around auxiliary like barns and outbuildings on ALR land. Is there a limit to, can you, if it's not a residence, like I tried to find information about this, like I understand the residence piece, but just in terms of outbuildings, is there any criteria around numbers of outbuildings or limits on that?
I'm not sure. I would have to look into that. Because, yeah, I only looked into this as a dwelling unit.
Yeah.
Since they're building it, so. I can get back to you on that if you'd like. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
My experience through the regional district, Councillor Nightingale, is that the outbuildings, there's quite a bit of flexibility for farm use buildings. And again, I'm going by memory. But the control over the residential is obviously a lot more of the focus. But the permitting, I know through the SLRD, the zoning bylaw there, the permitting, for instance, on barns and agricultural outbuildings is much looser and easier to navigate. I don't know if that's helpful at all. Any other questions or thoughts? Would somebody like to make a motion? Councillor Craddock? You might make the motion as presented.
please, thank you.
Are you doing comments though? Excuse me, losing my voice.
I'm sorry.
Are you doing comments?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I thought I'd opened it to that. Go ahead, Councillor.
I think I missed that. I'm sorry. I was like, well, what's the motion? I thought maybe 3 questions. Maybe I just woke up.
Go ahead.
My bad. I just wanted to just flesh out a couple of pieces here, like the request is double the size of what is permitted under the ALC regulations. So it's a substantial request, right? It's a 2,000 square foot suite on a 40-acre, less than 40-acre parcel. And, I think we really have to evaluate the scale of that. This is a very small parcel of land that may or may not become an orchard, but, is that commensurate with 2 buildings, 2 residential buildings, one that would have a 2,000 square foot suite on it? For me, that doesn't necessarily, the scale of the potential farmability of a 20-acre parcel with the 2,000, one suite that's 2,000 square feet, and then, whenever the house gets built, the 2 do not align for me. And then I have a few other issues with it, but fundamentally, I feel that, the ALC regulations are there for a reason. And it may well fit within our own bylaws and our own regulations, but when it comes down to farmland, the reasons behind them are very clear. And I can't support impacting farmland in any way that we actually potentially lose some land for food producing capability, which is the point of the ALC. And thank you, good report.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Nightingale.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Helmer's comments. My concern is that I have are around what happens if the current owner, for whatever reason, has to sell, move, and then that land isn't farmed in the way that has been, I have faith it will be in the way it's been suggested it will be as an orchard, but things can change in the future. And these changes to the secondary dwelling within the ALR were very recent and before you couldn't have a secondary residence. And it was quite specific that it has to be for farm hands. And I'm torn because I want to support agriculture. I want to support people working the land and providing accommodation for people that work on the land. It's just that I'm a bit nervous about precedents, because if we choose to do this in this situation, I'm curious about what would prevent, why wouldn't we have to do it all the time then? Because I would think that everybody that has a similar scenario will say that they're going to farm the land. There is no guarantee that the land will be farmed. And so I'm nervous about setting a precedent that then the next person will come and what are we going to say? What will be the defining factor that makes our decision different?
Thank you.
I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, no, thanks for the comments. If I can maybe add, maybe I can muddy things a little further. One, our options are actually three. If I understand it correctly, and again, this comes more from I feel how we've done it at the regional district, because you see a lot more of these there. We have the option to support as laid out. Support. Send it to the ALC. We have an option to not support, send a letter in non-support. And we also have the option to be silent and let the ALC make their own decisions, I believe. We've taken a different tack at different times, depending on the complexity of the request. I'm not suggesting any one of those three at this point. I'm just letting you know that there are those sort of the three options available to us. So now that I've muddied it further, Councillor Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, if that's the case, Mayor, I'd like to put a motion on the table that would refer it back to the Agricultural Land Commission with no comment.
Is there a seconder on the motion? Not seeing a hand, or am I missing one? Okay.
Well, I'm not seconding.
Okay, go ahead.
But what maybe we could, I would like to, if we do that, I would like to stress the fact that we're concerned about setting precedents, and that's an important piece to this.
I think we would do that if we express non-support. I would say.
Well, with no, sorry, I guess what I'm saying is because with no comment, our comment would be that we're concerned about setting a precedent. Like no comment at all. I mean, we do. Maybe we're just muddying this more. Am I muddying this more?
I thought I already did that. I hear what you're saying. To me, in my head, it was either we support it with or without comment. We don't support it. We say like non-support with our comments why, or we just allow the application to go through with no comment. To me, those are the three options that I see, but I'm open.
So you would like to do the second option then? Not support and then add in your comments as to why.
No, I do feel, I feel like the Agricultural Land Commission, they're the experts, and they're the ones that have come up with the restrictions, and these are relatively new. And so I feel they are the experts, and they have the knowledge and background and expertise to say why they would or wouldn't choose to support or not. Yeah.
So I'm looking at direction from council here. We'd like to go. We got a motion to send it to the ALC and remain silent on the floor. If there's no seconder, I will look for another motion. So first off, is there a seconder? Seeing none, I'll look for another motion.
I'll make a motion that we don't support it and don't forward it.
is there I think you still forward the comment on to the ALC.
Yeah, okay, we don't forward,
We forward our
don't
comments in non-support.
right. Non-support, thank you, yeah. And if we want to talk about why precedent scale.
Okay.
Land values,
What was the last one, sorry?
land values, protection of farmland.
Somebody like to second the motion? Am I not seeing a seconder on this one either?
Yes.
Do we need to pause for a second and gather? Because I'm feeling some confusion in the room from a distance here. We're gonna, like I said, Councillor Nightingale, go ahead.
Thank you for that offer. I would like to pause because I didn't realize that number 3 was an option. That we can just say we're disregarded and go to the ALC. I wasn't aware of that option.
Okay,
Sheena has her hand up now.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Fraser.
If you are feeling like you need more information, one option would be to defer this matter to July 18th. If you wanted to and then with some direction for staff to come back with some more information. Or whatever information that you're wanting, that would be one option. Because I can feel council sort of struggling and maybe needing a bit more information in some elements as to the difference between support, non-support, or no comment.
Yeah.
So one option would be to send it back to staff and just get a little bit more information so you've got a better understanding of the process.
Okay, is that the direction we'd like to go? Somebody like to
I
make?
can,
Go
I
ahead.
can withdraw my motion and then make that motion, we move it to July 18th and get more information in the interim.
Okay, moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Nightingale. Any discussion, any specifics other than what's mentioned? Go ahead, Councillor Craddock.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind putting it off, but what specifically are we asking staff for? I mean, I don't need a 40-page report.
No,
I think it's the third option piece.
Yeah, we just basically want to find the third option more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
An option is first being.
Then that's great.
Provided, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I can support that, Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comment? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that.
You know, next time this happens, Sheena, we're gonna be here for an hour and a half because
Well, maybe you'll be watching and I'll
you still have my number. We are on to 11.3, sorry. B, our housing needs report 2023. Mr. McRae, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. All right, let me figure out. Getting shared. Have you seen a presentation online? Excellent. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to present to you the Village of Pemberton's Housing Need Report, the 2023 edition. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land. Village of Pemberton lies completely within traditional territory of the Lowot Nation. The nation has inherent Aboriginal rights and Aboriginal title over all lands within its territory. Those rights have never been ceded, surrendered, or abandoned. So tonight I'll give you a quick agenda of what we're going to be talking about. So I'll give you a quick rundown of what a housing needs report is, a quick overview of COVID-19 impacts and data limitations, and then we'll dive into the body of the report. So the community overview, housing profile, Pemberton's housing needs, summary, and next steps. So the housing needs report is a pretty long document. I tried to just pick out the highlights here, but I'll move quickly here, knowing that it's been a long day for everyone. So what is a housing needs report? So it's really a creation of the provincial government to help communities understand their housing needs and you know, community trends in there that are affecting housing in their community. So it's a very, I took a snapshot and put it on the side of this slide showing kind of the specification and requirements that the province asks to include in these documents. Just to highlight, this is a very tightly scripted affair of what the province wants us to include, but with the noble goal of helping us understand our housing needs and trends better. So you'll see that will be taken and used to inform all future plans and policy. And the big example of that is the OCP update, which I'll talk about more. And the other value of the housing needs report is that it supports applying for grant funding going forward, which I'll talk about more later as well. Okay, so really big thing to talk about here. It's referenced throughout the report. It's the impact of COVID-19. The census, Canada Census of 2021 was conducted during pretty much the height of the pandemic. Whistler Blackcomb was closed for most of that season, if I recall correctly. And so that had a huge impact on the census data that we gathered. So it was the travel restrictions. So that's, you know, fewer tourists in the area, but it's also people working from home, no foreign temporary workers, and just general disruptions to the economic patterns of the valley. And then you had massive income supports being provided by the federal government. So all that shows up in the income data that we collect for this report. So it's a bit of a caveat that, you know, some of the data that we gathered and some of the trends that you're going to see, we have to kind of be careful not to draw conclusions from. We can't celebrate them too much, especially trends that show low income households declining because the COVID-19 pandemic had such an impact. Just quickly, there's a few other ones. So some of the data comes from the BC census. That's a much smaller sample size. It's only a 25% sample of the population. So that just creates less reliability. And then there's a handful of limitations to being a small community. So we're not covered by CMHC rental data, like the rental vacancy rate and median rent isn't available for Pemberton. And then there's the boundary extensions that have happened over the time period that this report analyzes. That's always going to cause a bit of a moving goalpost situation there. So I'll jump right into it and I'll try to go quickly here. Here's a snapshot of Pemberton's population. Basically, we're a fast-growing community in a fast-growing region. Here's the annualized growth rate over time compared to the region. The key here is that 5.8% annualized growth rate. So that's every year over the last 5 years. We'll come back to that 5.8% number. So keep that in your mind. Here's a quick rundown of the household composition of Pemberton. So you can kind of see the census dives right into details about how many households that we have of each different type. If you add up the couples with children and one parent households, so almost 40% of the population is family. Pemberton is and has been a young community compared to the region and the province. And as time has gone on, we've actually seen our proportion of seniors effectively doubled since the beginning. So since 2006 to 2021. About 6% of Pemberton's population identifies as being Indigenous. Again, that's, as council will know, that it only covers the village of Pemberton boundaries. If you look at the valley as a whole, that number would be much higher. Here's a snapshot of median household income. So this is across all households. Pemberton reported a median household income of about $100,000 in 2021, substantial increase from 2006. Similar increases were seen in the region and the province, but not to the same degree. I chose this slide just to bring up as well to highlight how the census captures different household types have different incomes. So you can see that couples with children and without children have much higher incomes than one parent families and individuals, as you would expect, but you'll see that figure into the report later on. So I just wanted to make sure we looked at that. And as you can see that, as similar to the last slide, incomes have increased significantly. However, all subject to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we wouldn't want to, we can't draw too many conclusions from these trends. And similarly, here's the low income cutoff for Pemberton. I think the number is something like $12,000 or $15,000 for income to be counted in this category. So the number has gone down, but again, with COVID-19, we should be cautious without from drawing conclusions. Okay, and onto the housing profile. So this is looking more specifically at the housing stock of the village. As of the 2021 census, we had 1,355 dwelling units in the village. And you can see the breakdown by structure type here. So we have a pretty diverse housing stock in the village. Obviously lots of single detached homes, but plenty of townhouses and apartments as well. Relative to the region, you can see we have actually a lower proportion of single family homes and a higher proportion of townhomes. Looking at how that structure type has evolved over time, it's stayed relatively constant. You'll see that 14% of semi-detached houses disappearing. We asked Statistics Canada what happened there. We didn't really receive a satisfactory response, but some sort of reclassification. I know those houses didn't disappear. His Fraser told me this houses didn't disappear. This is to highlight that Pemberton's housing stock is quite new, with the majority of dwellings built since 1990. And here we show the evolution of housing tenure over time. So the key point here is that 65, as of 2021, 65% of residents owned their own homes, with 35% were renters. Here's the average home sales price over time from 2013 to 2022. You can see, I think, something that everyone has experienced and knows has happened. Absolutely mind-blowing increase in residential land value, residential unit for cost. Here is as Statistics Canada gathers it, the median monthly shelter cost for owned dwellings. And so this is a bit of a misleading or a very particular statistic that we need to unpack just so that everyone understands what this really is. So that number for 2021 of $2,100 a month is the middle value for all owners in the village. So that's including the person who bought their house 40 years ago and has no mortgage price, all the way to the person who bought yesterday and has a significant mortgage cost. So that's the middle value of close to the average, but a little bit different for all that for the whole range. So we recognize that this is not really indicative of what housing costs are as of today, but it's the closest you can get with the census data. So that number is used, that heavily caveated number is used for our first affordability analysis. So this is just looking at the different household types and then taking the median income. If you work out what 30% of that is, divided by 12 to get your monthly value, and then comparing that to that $22,100 value, you can see that based upon this analysis, it would appear that for couples with children and without children, Pemberton is somewhat or fairly affordable. But as you get into those one-parent households and non-census families, so that's individuals and various other household types, Pemberton is not affordable. But we did another analysis because we recognized that approach was a little bit limiting. So here's a little bit of a more thorough affordability gap analysis. And so this is looking at similarly household type, looking at their 2022 median net household income. So that was adjusted based on inflation to arrive at these numbers, and then working out what that affordable monthly housing cost would be, and then comparing that for single detached dwellings with or without a suite. And a big noteworthy here is that for any unit over $1 million, a 20% down payment is required. So that's baked into this calculation. And with that, you can see what the estimated monthly housing costs were for those different dwelling types. And the conclusion of this analysis is that for any type of household in Pemberton, it is not affordable. And so that this is just an extension of that similar format for the townhouses, apartments, and manufactured homes. And as you can see, as we get to the smaller units and the more affordable options, the affordability analysis does show that those units become affordable for couples, but still a struggle for individuals and those non-census families. And so moving on to rented dwellings, here's the exact same median monthly shelter cost for rented dwellings. That same caveat applies, but this is across the whole population. So this number is not indicative of what you would encounter in the rental market today. But it's a starting point, it's something. So $1,500 is sorry, $1,560. And so we did a rental affordability gap analysis in a very similar format. So looking at the different households, working out what their affordable monthly housing cost would be, and then demonstrating and then working out the difference of that with the median shelter cost. And so according to this analysis, couples again are squeezing by, but for the other household type, it is a struggle. And so then we're jumping into the housing needs section of the report. And so these are numbers that I really like to unpack with council, just so everyone understands how we arrived at these values. So this is suggesting or showing that the underlying housing need, and that's just for rental, is about 130 units. And then looking forward is the anticipated housing need for home ownership and for rental. And so keep those numbers in mind, that 139 and the 466 and the 242, and I'll show you where those numbers come from. So the current housing need is essentially just the result of looking at what Statistics Canada calls our core housing need, which is a very statistical definition, which it basically is core housing need is defined as if a household is experiencing unaffordable housing, unsuitable housing, which would be it's too small for them, or inadequate housing, which would mean it needs major repairs. So a core housing need is if a household falls into at least one of those categories, and they cannot afford the median rent on a more suitable unit. So it's a bit of a statistical creation, but that's what the CMHC and other government agencies use to work out core housing needs. And so again, with the COVID-19 pandemic causing a huge amount of uncertainty in the 2021 statistics, we decided that a more accurate way to arrive at core housing need for Pemberton is to look at the 4-year average. And the other reason that 4-year average number was chosen is because Pemberton actually shows a high degree of fluctuation in those affordability, suitability, and adequacy, less so in the adequacy point, more so than other communities where you see that sort of gently corrected building. Pemberton's history is much more fluid. That's probably to do with our proximity to Whistler and other things like that. So all to say that underlying housing need is essentially based on core housing need, which is arrived at through this process. So that's where that 139 number comes from. And so yes, underlying housing need is only for renters. It's not done for owners, because essentially owners move through the housing system in a different manner because of home equity and other things like that. And then moving into looking forward, but looking at that anticipated housing need for home ownership and for rentals. And so to do that, we had to start with a population projection. And so it's always difficult to sort of gauge what the future will hold. So we started by looking at a range of different possibilities. And so to kind of construct that range, we took that growth rate, that 5.8% over the last 5 years, and that is what the high growth scenario is based on here. So that's about a 5% annualized growth rate. And then on the low side, that baseline is just based on the Pemberton's growth rate over that 20-year period. So where it's actually more like really 1.5% annualized. And then the middle range is something in the middle, which it actually works out very closely if you look at Pemberton's population growth over the last 10 years. And it's worth mentioning as well, we just quickly highlighted in this graph when the population would be projected to cross that 5,000 threshold, symbolic and having some implications for the village. You can see in the high scenario, we're crossing it sometime in 2027. And then in the mid growth scenario, it might be more like 2033. And so taking those population projections and working out kind of the growth of households over time for each of those scenarios, you can see, and then working with the proportion of the population that's an owner or a renter, you can see we arrive at these numbers for each of the three scenarios. And so if you remember that 466 and 242 number, you see those in the high growth scenario. And so really that's because as we'll get to, I think it's actually the next slide. Yes, okay. It's moving too fast for myself. So we showed ultimately the report highlights that high growth scenario because you can see that our annual, starting from the left-hand column here, our annual average net building permits. So that's building permits issued for dwelling units every year. So on average, the village has been issuing about 60 permits. Now, according to Statistics Canada, according to the census, that number was actually a little bit higher. That's not uncommon. In most communities, you'll see the number of dwelling units created as actually a slightly higher than number of building permits issued. And that happens for a variety of reasons. But essentially people are turning a single family home into a single family home plus suite and choosing not to access the building permit for that work. So, but all to say that, Pemberton is, I think it's widely visible that Pemberton is seeing a significant housing pressure, all the problems that come with housing pressures, yet we are already building dwelling units that at a rate that is higher than the median growth scenario defined in the report. So that's where we kind of arrived at, well, if we're already experiencing housing pressures and we're delivering at a rate that is higher than that median scenario, then in order to alleviate any of these pressures, we'll probably need to be looking at more like the high scenario. And so in summary, Pemberton is a dynamic population that requires a flexible housing thought. So that's like as I referred to a little bit earlier, a very dynamic population with Whistler being so close by, seasonal workers moving through. The report mentions that we have about a 20% turnover rate in residents moving either within the community or outside of the community every year. So that gives you a sense of a very mobile population. And so, housing types that allow for that kind of flexibility are secondary suites or low-cost suites, things like that. What's the term? Alternative dwelling units or auxiliary dwelling units, things like that. Another conclusion of the report, which doesn't show up in the numbers as much, is housing precarity is on the rise. So that's, part of this report is engagement with the community. And in that engagement, it shows that, people, or I should say respondents, identified an increased visibility of homelessness in the community, more so than in years previous. So that is speaking, that point is speaking to that rise of housing precarity. More rental options are needed. So out of this report, we find that only 9.5% of our rental stock is what we call primary rental. So that's like in an apartment building, purpose-built rental for perpetuity. So over 90% of the renting population lives in secondary rentals. So that's like secondary suites or rented condos or homes. And so it's primary rental is preferred because it's considered to be a little bit more secure, more likely to be in place for a longer period of time, less likely to have to move if an owner changes their mind. And so this report highlights that we need to look at more purpose-built rental, primary rental options. And then, of course, the summary or the conclusion that everyone recognizes homeownership costs are high and escalating. So one of the conclusions of the report is essentially looking at ways we can help with that, if any. And so looking at smaller lots, things like that to try to help with creating more affordable options. So next steps that come out of this report are really is going to become one of the base layers of village policy moving forward. So that it's going to inform the OCP update and any other housing related policy that we create. But it also benefits the community. So it allows private investors or other community members who are interested in housing to access data related to housing in the community. It's supporting grant applications, as I mentioned earlier. Our team is working on the village's application for the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is a considerable grant application. And you actually get 5 points for having an updated housing needs report. So we'll take it. The next update of the housing needs report will be in 2028, after the 2026 census. I believe that concludes my presentation. I apologize for taking very quickly. Please do look at the report if you are curious to learn more. I just didn't want to spend all night with you here. So, yeah, are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. McRae. Any questions from council? Councillor Helmer, go ahead.
Just a quick question. It's such a good report, so I think obviously hours later to, and then the consideration around, which numbers to choose and which scenarios. But I am curious how do you align the sort of community need to provide housing for the community versus providing housing with no control over, and this is just the open market, but it's one thing to really understand the demographics of Pemberton and the residents, but there's no control when we match that to housing stock. So, because if there was, I think we would have seen that gap close quite quickly, right? If we're building it, whatever you said, the medium scenario, that building at that scenario should be providing enough housing to fill the needs of the local community, but it's not, because there's this influx of non-community members. And I just wonder, as a council, how do we take that into consideration when we're making housing decisions? And we understand that we need people that want to work here, to live here, and we need to provide them housing, but we have really no control over that. So we're providing housing for essentially the world, but our mandate is making sure that our community is safe and has housing. I'm curious what your thoughts.
Yeah, it's really fair. That's a problem that every council in British Columbia and probably Canada is struggling with the trends that you see in this housing report for Pemberton are nationwide. That the increase in residential unit prices has been witnessed across the country, and so it's definitely not a problem unique to Pemberton. However, we do experience it a little bit more acutely. Ultimately, Pemberton is a desirable community. People are very interested in living here. And so the report, the consultants who supported us in this report are very clear to, say it's very, difficult to untangle growth. Like if you build new houses versus population growth, like which drives which, they're so interconnected. You're always going to have, such a variety of different forces depending on economic conditions or other factors. Difficult to really unpack that whole thing, but ultimately they would point to the fact that we have these unpermitted dwellings appearing at a fairly significant rate. I mean, not to say that other communities don't have that, but that is evidence that there is that underlying pressure looking for satisfaction. When we talk more about coming back to your question about trying to house Pemberton residents more, so that's a very challenging area because we live in a country with a housing market that is nationwide and very fluid. It's very easy to relocate to a new community, to buy a house and sell a house there. So that creates this social mobility that we all are so comfortable with, and it's a fantastic part of Canada. Now, trying to limit housing to be more oriented only for residents of Pemberton, you can do through, non-market housing essentially is what the term would be for finding ways through housing agreements or other ways to try to preserve housing stock for individuals. I mean, the Whistler Housing Authority is probably the best example of that you could find in all of North America. There's various reasons why we would not be able to pull that off. But it does have also downsides in that it's not as easy to move in and out of. It's not as fluid to work with essentially. And then you have those challenging decisions about who lives where that the market will decide to be in market housing, but in non-market housing, someone else has to make that decision. So maybe that's an example like a BC housing project where if you have a family that downsizes, children move off to university, they no longer qualify for the 4-bedroom unit. They now have to be moved into the 2-bedroom unit. In a housing market situation, they would be rewarded for doing that. In a non-market housing situation, you can imagine it's a bit of a different negotiation to ask them to relocate to the smaller unit.
No, that's a great example, or great example, understand everything.
I got Councillor Ramsden and Councillor Nightingale.
I just wanted to clarify, so when we were talking about the median income, so that I believe it was 100,000 for couples with no children, you're talking about median income of homeowners as opposed to renters, correct?
Actually, to the chair, in the report, you'll see that there is, so that number is in the report, the median household income of couples without or with or without children. For renters, but also for owners. Essentially, that number, you can work it out through the statistics. You can find that number for the whole population or just for the owners of the community or just for the renters of the community.
Okay, so, okay.
So I mean, maybe that headline number that I presented to you was for the whole community.
Okay, so both. And then I was just wondering, do they, in the housing needs assessment, was there any indication of how many dwelling units are occupied by homeowners?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, there's a statistic in the report that looks at, what I think Statistics Canada calls dwellings occupied by usual residents. And interestingly enough, that increased substantially in Pemberton between 2016 and 2021. And that's probably another COVID-19 impact that we saw. A lot of people who had a secondary dwelling in the village choosing to relocate here or other, for various reasons.
Okay.
Councillor Nightingale.
Yeah, I was curious about just ideas around secondary rentals, like incentive. How do we, because that became very clear that there's just the rental stock is so low, but how can we incentivize and regulate secondary rentals? I'm just putting it out there. I'm asking for just your thoughts on that.
No, it's a good question to the chair. I don't know if I have any great answers to that question. In the Housing Accelerator Fund, there's a few different avenues for looking at ways to try to incentivize purpose-built rental. Even things like upfront grants, where if you could say to receive a grant from the federal government and provide it to the nonprofit developer to incentivize them to make their pro forma work to complete that project, something like that. Is that?
Well, I was thinking more along for secondary rentals, not primary, secondary.
For individual unit holders.
Ideas around incentivizing secondary rentals. Like suites?
Are you thinking about the construction of suites or the renting of suites? Or both?
Both. Incentivizing people to have a suite if they're able, to have regulations around it. That was something that really stuck out to me in the report that they highlighted was coming up with incentives and regulations to encourage secondary suites or.
Yeah,
rentals?
sure. The zoning bylaw is one of the most powerful tools we have to control, what types of dwellings and the count of dwellings that is created in each lot. So one way to increase the stock of secondary rentals would be to relax the limit on the number of dwelling units permitted on each individual lot. We have talked, as a team, there's a lot of this kind of conversation we have. And the idea of requiring a suite, say that like a new development, requiring every new home to have a suite we had an interesting conversation about that, because on the one side you do create additional rental units, but on the other hand, you're driving up the cost of building a home. So it's kind of that there's just so many different factors at play.
Thank you.
But it's something you think about for sure.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Councillor Craig, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't.
Are there any further comments? Mine are just thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Who's up?
You're just saying, and I'll make a motion to proceed.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Craddock, further discussion? Yeah, my comments are, thank you for the report. This is a great tool to have, and hopefully it'll help us as we look at all these different applications. And, one of the things that was going through my head when I was reading it and trying to figure out, wrap my head around some of the numbers and what we need, was how we, and this might be a Mr. Brown question, but how we really focus on, we talk a lot about stepping back in the big picture and how we focus on ensuring that the different types of housing that are needed and identified in the report are happening in tandem and happening all over the place, so that we're capturing all these needs. As we look at one, not every development is going to have obviously every type of housing in it. So it'll be really interesting to see how we use this tool to make sure that as we go through different applications and look at things broadly, that we're really hitting our targets, I guess is what I'm obviously saying, stating the obvious. But yeah, thank you very much for the report. Not a ton of surprises in there. A few things that are definitely unique to, as you said, Mr. McCray, the challenges are not unique to Pemberton, but we do have some unique nuances here in terms of what we need in our housing market. So thank you very much for the report. And I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. McCray.
Thank you. One last comment. Staff, I think, are of the same mind that, what you said about keeping track of different structure types and understanding if we're hitting our targets. We have started to move in that direction as well based on this report. So I think it has triggered similar thoughts in staff that it has in council. So
yeah,
that's great news.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take the rest of the day off, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us all the way up to, we don't have anything, finance, operations, recreation, or fire, no bylaws, so it takes us to the mayor's report. I only have a couple quick items. Number one, attended the transfer, I guess, from the interim board to the new permanent board for the Spelkumtum Community Forest. We had a luncheon together, and I thought our executive director did a great job setting it up. And it gave us the opportunity to, share the history and of how we got to where we are with the community forest, from, again, the historical setup to the foundation that the interim board has set up, to get to know each other better and just talk about values and other things. And so I thought it was a really great meeting, a nice luncheon. We broke bread together. Yeah, I thought it was a really great event, and I want to thank Andrea Blakey for putting it on, our executive director, and setting it all up, and good luck to the new board. Also attended the permanent secondary grad. Always for me personally, I'm a big fan of teenagers, so always a highlight for me in my role is to hang out at the grad and just see the kids, those I know and those that I don't, graduate. And it's just such a great scene. There's a ton of alumni there, obviously family and friends. Yeah, and it was just a really nice day. It was well put on, the ceremony, and it's just so great to see all the kids up there. And it's their prom next week, so just want to take this stage to wish the class of 2023 a huge congratulations and good luck. Two other items. One is regarding correspondence. This is a question for the rest of council here. Over the last months, we've run into a couple of, I don't know what you want to call it, sticky points or whatever, when it comes to correspondences in terms of when to put them on our council agenda, how they should be considered and all that sort of thing. Do they go on as soon as you receive them? Do they go on when the item that being discussed is on the agenda? Does it go on both? How do we want to do it? We've seen some correspondences which are addressed to staff and only some council. Do those go on the agenda? So I think we've seen a couple of moments where we've struggled to figure out exactly what the best way forward is. And so my thought was, looking at some of the correspondences coming recently, my question for council was, are we interested in having staff, not a big job, just do a bit of a report on best practices and maybe what other communities do to manage some of their correspondence, and how we might want to look at our practice in managing correspondences so that we are as responsive as possible to our residents. I don't know if anybody feels similarly, or if this is a good use of time at this point, but it was just something that came to my mind. Go ahead, Councillor Ramsden.
Yeah, it is something that had actually occurred to me in the last few meetings. I think your idea to have staff look into potentially developing a policy on how we handle this type of correspondence would be very good. And I think because for me also, I'm looking at it more from a process point of view and a transparency point of view, and that, if there is a set policy on, and I realize there is some policy, but just reviewing what we have in place, something that's maybe a bit more comprehensive, and then being able to sit down and make sure that the way that we're handling correspondence is done in a timely manner, but one that's done that to the best of our ability ensures that we're handling correspondence in an equal and transparent way, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's hard for me to see if there's nodding heads or anything here. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Nightingale, then Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, I would echo Councillor Ramsden's comments. I would like to, whatever we can do to encourage people to weigh in and engage as community members. And if making this more streamlined is more, makes it more effective and easier for people to engage, then I would support that. I am obviously very cognizant of staff time right now. So I'm wondering if well, I'll actually speak to Ms. Tracy. Do you think it's something that staff has the capacity to do right now, or could we do something?
I think obviously the capacity is a challenge, but it's more challenging to manage the way some things are coming right now and not have alignment or clarity as to decision-making criteria about what goes where. And I think if we have that clarity from council, that ultimately will be worth any effort that it is to bring something forward to you all in terms of what the best practices would be or recommendations.
Thank you.
Councillor Helmer.
Yeah, I don't have any opposition to it. I think it's probably a good idea. I think though that, what is important to me as a counselor is that I see what is coming to me, addressed to me, foundation, like that, whatever it is, whatever the work is that we do, I think that piece needs to be addressed. And, that's very clearly what we're hearing from the community. And when we don't see what they're sending us in a timely manner, we're getting feedback that that's not okay. So that is going to be my perspective on it, but absolutely support examining the process to make sure that it's working for everybody. but that's what I'll be pinning my needs on.
So would somebody like to table a motion to direct staff to prepare a report to bring back to the committee of whole regarding best practices and recommendations around managing correspondence from residents? Somebody like to make that motion? Councillor Ramsden, seconder. Councillor Nightingale, any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And last, thank you. And last item on my report, I just want to remind us that tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I hope we all take a moment to consider a little bit of what that means, consider the unceded lands that we live on and enjoy on a daily basis, consider the history of our valley here that we live on and enjoy on a daily basis, that we consider our relationships and our path towards decolonization, and find our own personal way to celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day. And that's it for my report. Are there any councillors' reports? Councillor Craddock, go ahead.
Just to follow up on your report, Mayor, on the Squalcoomton Community Forest get together. It's been 2 years since you and I and Sheena joined the First Nations to help set up the community forest. I think it went well. It was a lot of work, and the initial intent was to pass it over to the community in both areas, Lillooet and ourselves. And it was nice to see the people that put their names forward and are taking over from our positions. And I wish them well, along with Councillor Nightingale, who's taking up the torch for the council now. So I was excited about that, and I look forward to their leadership going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Craddock. Anyone else? Councillor Nightingale, go ahead.
Just 2 things. I want to also say a huge thank you for the workshop last week, which I thought was really powerful in a lot of ways and informative and eye-opening. So I really appreciate the opportunity for that as we move ahead. And also, yeah, Pemberton Arts Council working very, very hard for the Mountain Muse Festival this weekend. Hope the whole community comes out. Celebrate.
Where are tickets available?
Tickets available.
Where?
Oh, online.
Anyone else? All right, thanks everyone. That takes us to correspondence. We have none for action. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for information. Would anybody like to pull any out? Or file and receive?
Move to receive and file.
Councillor Craddock, seconded by Councillor Helmer. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Decision on late business. Late business, we have none. Notice of motion. And question period. Just got to go to my notes. The regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. If any members of the public attending via Zoom wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls, and that will notify staff that you'd like to ask a question, and they will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. As a reminder, this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded and will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Do we have anybody with questions? Mr. Ferdine?
Seeing none.
Thank you very much. Then I will look, we're gonna have to go back in camera. Please don't run away, but I'll look for a motion to, go in camera. Moved by Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Helmer. Any opposed? Motion carries. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Ethan. Now we're recording. Everybody's standing up, waiting to leave. I'll reconvene the regular council meeting, and I will look for a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Craddock, second by Councillor Helmer. Meeting's adjourned. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Maybe we should make one of these so